Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for LSNJ's D. Miller Justice Series webinar, AI and Access to Justice in New Jersey. This free webinar is the latest installment in our public-facing webinar series named in honor of our former longtime president and co-founder, D. Miller. In addition to being instrumental in creating the foundation of the legal services system in New Jersey, he was a fierce advocate for racial, social, and economic justice, and in particular, as it impacted vulnerable segments of the New Jersey community. This focus remains central to LSNJ's mission. Since 2001, this series has been a space for conversations around racial and social justice issues, ranging from reparations to environmental justice to bias and discrimination. And during the Justice Series, you'll hear from leading voices in the legal landscape in New Jersey. You can visit our website to access content, lsnj.org. I also wanted to offer a few remarks before we kick off our panel. We have an esteemed panel of speakers, so I'm going to say a few words and then get out of the way. First, I think we should make clear that in order to have an honest conversation about equity and fairness in the US and in New Jersey, we have to talk about the justice gap. The justice gap is defined as the difference between civil legal needs and the resources available to meet that need. According to the most recent Justice Gap study conducted by the Legal Services Corporation, low-income Americans did not receive any or enough legal help for 92% of their civil legal problems, citing cost as the primary barrier. In a high cost of living state where more than 3.1 million New Jerseyans, or 1/3 of our state's population, live in poverty, this cost barrier is particularly acute. What are the civil legal problems? Everything ranging from being evicted from your home, needing protection from a domestic violence situation, fighting to access unemployment insurance or other safety net benefits. And it's not easy doing this work alone and without legal assistance. But fundamentally, access to justice is more than being able to afford a lawyer. It also means whether you know where to go for help. It means whether you're part of a community that is disproportionately being taken to court, whether you have mobility issues with physical access to the courthouse, whether you can be understood and heard in your own language, and ultimately whether you have the ability to seek and receive fair resolution for important legal issues. So how is AI and technology part of this picture? The question is, how is it not? Technology is growing fast. And by way of example, in the span of a lifetime, we've seen the invention of the cell phone in 1973 and the transformation into the smartphone it is today, supercomputers that we carry around in our pocket that affect almost every aspect of our lives. More than just communication, high-speed internet access, navigation, advanced computing, and a world of information at fingertips. Life-changing technology and the capabilities are increasing exponentially. And now with the growth of artificial intelligence and generative AI, it's a whole new frontier. New powerful tools are poised to make our lives easier, to work for us, to turn tasks that used to take hours possible in seconds, translating websites that can translate 249 languages at the speed of a mouse click. So the question is more, can the advancement of AI and technology level the playing field, or can it add to or simplify, or will it amplify existing inequities? Either way, AI is not going anywhere. So maybe the best question is, can it offer new opportunities? How do we leverage those opportunities to increase access for those who traditionally have had less opportunity, making sure that we're focused on people-centered or client-centered solutions that are well-informed, that are safe and protective of data and of individuals? What are ways we might take a defensive approach and strategize against AI uses, which might be leveraged against vulnerable communities? And so with that introduction, I wanted to briefly provide you with bioinformation for each of our panelists. They all offer unique perspectives on access to justice, AI, and technology. First, Laks Kattalai is the Chief Information Officer for the New Jersey courts. And in this position, he develops strategies and manages the Judiciary's Information Technology Office, collaborating closely with both internal and external stakeholders. Laks plays a vital role in guiding the judiciary's responsible and ethical initiatives in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity through effective governance and implementation strategies. Jessica Lewis Kelly, she serves as a special assistant to the administrative director of the courts. She coordinates and supports the Supreme Court Committee on AI and the courts, the Working Group on Judiciary Use of AI, and the New Jersey delegation to the National Courts and Sciences Institute Data Sciences and Artificial Intelligence Initiative, as well as serving on the New Jersey State Bar Association Standing Committee on Artificial Intelligence. Jessica has provided CLE instruction on various topics, including for the American Judges Association, National Consortium on Racial and Ethnic Fairness in the Courts, and the National Center for State Courts, and the New Jersey State Bar Association. Next, Jennifer Sellitti is the public defender for the New Jersey Office of the Public Defender. Prior to becoming public defender, Jennifer served as Director of Training and Communications for OPD. She previously served as a deputy of the agency's Middlesex Trial Region and as an Assistant Deputy Public Defender in the Essex County Adult Region. Jennifer also worked as a staff attorney for the Committee for Public Counsel Services in Massachusetts and as a Massachusetts Superior Court law clerk before joining the OPD. Jennifer has trained lawyers in more than 35 states and speaks nationally about topics ranging from trial advocacy to transforming public defense systems. Trish Perlmutter serves as Executive Director for Policy, Outreach, and Community Relations for the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights. And in that role, she supports the Policy and Community Relations Unit's work to prevent and eliminate discrimination and bias-based harassment. She has led policy initiatives to address discrimination and harassment in schools, algorithmic discrimination, disparate impact discrimination, workplace pregnancy and breastfeeding accommodations, as well as other cutting-edge civil rights issues. Prior to that, and a position at Partners, Trish was a clinical professor at the Center for Social Justice at Seton Hall University School of Law. Speaking of, Abdul Rehman Khan is an assistant clinical professor at Seton Hall Law School's Center for Social Justice. He directs the Housing and Legal Design Clinic and founded the New Jersey Legal Design Lab, a social change laboratory that shifts power into local movements through co-creation, design methods, understanding law as a source of its own design. Prior to joining Seton Hall Law, Professor Khan served as the inaugural pro bono fellow for the city of Newark with McCarter and English. And additionally, he taught constitutional law and civil liberties and research methods and social impact in the political science department at St. Peter's University. Professor Khan also serves on the board of directors for Essex Newark Legal Services. So I want to extend each of you a warm welcome and thank you for joining us for this conversation. And why don't we start with the New Jersey court? I think it's a great place to start. The judiciary has been at the forefront of justice initiatives for some time. Bias training, the Judiciary Action Plan, and technology, as we mentioned, is another frontier. And I know that in cooperation, in partnership with the courts, developed numerous presentation trainings on AI and technology. And we're hoping that you could take some time to walk us through a bit about what you all are seeing in implementation, but laying the groundwork for AI and the technology. But first, talk a little bit about the role of the judiciary in New Jersey.
Akil, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone at Legal Services and everyone else who's on this wonderful panel today. The courts are very, very excited to be a part of this presentation. We are excited for the opportunity to talk about artificial intelligence and the way that it already has changed and will continue to change the legal landscape. And before I jump into the slides, and I appreciate that our mission statement has been shown for some time because I think it's critical to understanding what it is that the New Jersey courts does. I want to just answer preliminarily some of the questions that Akil posed. And the first was whether or not AI has the possibility or the potential to help us to bridge the justice gap. Because to me, the answer to that question is yes, if. It's not yes, but. It's yes, it absolutely has that capacity, but only if we establish the right policies, the right guardrails, and only if we maintain a focus on all people who are a part of the community that we seek to serve, which includes not only the many attorneys in our state, and thank you to so many for being with us here today, but also the many people who don't have legal representation and the many people who don't have as much legal representation as they might otherwise need to truly have access to justice and to navigate the court system. Basically, the mission statement of our court system here in New Jersey is to be an independent branch of government. We are constitutionally entrusted with the fair and just resolution of disputes in order to preserve the rule of law, to protect the rights and liberties guaranteed by the constitutions. And one of the things that our Chief Justice and our Administrative Director frequently remind us is to keep the main thing the main thing. This is the main thing for the courts. It is to ensure that we provide fairness and a neutral forum for the fair and just resolution of disputes. And when you look at our vision statement, you get a little bit more detail in terms of how it is that the New Jersey courts really focuses on doing that every day in all of the work that we do. And if you've ever been to our website and read the entirety of our vision statement, you will see that the very first bullet point there is that we will provide equal access to a fair and effective system of justice for everyone, not only for some people, not only for the people who have lawyers, not only for the people who truly understand technology and its risks and its benefits and how to navigate it easily, but for everyone who needs to come into our courts without excess cost, without excess inconvenience or delay, and with sensitivity to the increasingly diverse society that we are called to serve. And Laks, thankfully, is going to be here to provide a technological background for this, because I certainly don't have the skill set to do it. But I think before we really move into a detailed conversation of artificial intelligence and what we see on the horizon, understanding some key terms and what it is we're going to talk about will be really helpful. So Laks?
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Akil. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in this morning. Artificial intelligence is trying to redefine what it means to be human. And you heard that right. I mean, the far-reaching impact of this technology is not lost on anyone. And that's why there's tremendous interest today with so many of you tuning in to understand the implications of it, what this technology means for us. There are three different camps at this point. There are people who are total believers in this technology, thinking that it is going to save the civilization, right? And there are people who are very scared about this technology, understandably so. And a lot of that fear is coming from not knowing what this can do. They think it's going to end the civilization. A lot of us who have been learning this technology, we are in the camp that's somewhere in the middle, where we think we can control this technology, we can responsibly implement it, and we can use it to the betterment of the civilization, right? So we looked at the mission and the vision of the judiciary. One of the ways we have been approaching this technology is doing it in a very ethical, responsible manner. There are private industries, it's a fight for survival for them. So a lot of them jumped into this technology purely from how they can monetize this technology, how they can make more money. We didn't necessarily look at it only as a technology solution. We looked at it from how can we use this technology to bridge that gap that Akil and Jessica talked about in terms of the justice gap that we have in place. So having said that, let's jump into some of the terms and concepts. I'm going to generalize some of the examples because typically we have seen when we have so many people participating in these sessions, the level of background and the knowledge of AI tremendously varies. So we always try to cater to the people who are looking to get some basic concepts rather than the ones who are already having very advanced knowledge of the topic, right? So the artificial intelligence, when you look at it, there are so many ways it's already impacting us in our real life. One of the simplest examples that resonates with people is that when you watch YouTube or Netflix, based on your watch history, it's throwing you a lot of recommendations. Sometimes it surprises you to the, wow, it's going where I want to go. And there are times it can be a little off the mark. That's because machine learning, as the word term implies, the machine continues to learn from every action that we do, every step that we take, and it's going to get better and better. So when it looks at your watch history for, like, say, 10 days, it's going to make some predictions that are going to be somewhat accurate. But if it watches you for a year, it's going to get a lot better. So it's all about the data it's able to watch, the opportunity we are providing it for it to collect that data, and it's going to get better and better. And AI is something that's been in existence for a really long time, but the generative AI has taken the world by storm. The main difference is that generative AI did something that the prior versions of AI didn't do. It was able to create something new from what it had already seen. And that appealed to a lot of people. That also created some concerns in terms of piracy, privacy concerns. So there are things that the technology community is dealing with, but Gen AI at the heart of it has this ability to create something new from what it had seen and what it had learned in the past. And to me, that's pretty huge. So the fundamental concepts of AI, and there's a lot of questions. I mean, we keep hearing from people. I keep hearing this terminology, machine learning. I keep hearing deep learning. And are they all the same? How are they different, right? So to me, the easiest way to explain this to a very diverse set of audiences that look at AI as the umbrella term, right? So artificial intelligence is the umbrella term. Underneath AI, you have machine learning, which is a subset of that field, very important a subset of that field, right? Machine learning, again, as I said before, as the name implies, a machine continuing to learn from the data it's being provided by the users through input, even through observation. So it continues to learn and continues to get better and continues to mature. So machine learning can help you in terms of making some predictions. Machine learning can help you to arrive at some new decisions. So machine learning at the heart of it is going to be a very good decision support mechanism for you, right? Language processing, again, we are looking at this. Recently, it's taken the world by storm because of the Gen AI, the ability for this particular technology to produce something new. And also, at the essence of it, to simplify it, it predicts the next word. Think of it as autocomplete at the least. Like when you try to enter something, it tries to complete the next sentence for you. That's just autocomplete at its basic level. But from language processing point of view and Gen AI point of view, from deep learning point of view, it's not just predicting the next word, it's predicting the next sentence, it's predicting the next paragraph. It can predict the entire write-up that you're looking to do. That is the power of it because it had been trained on a really large language model. So repeating for the benefit of everybody, AI is at the highest level, and then you have machine learning, deep learning, and language processing. The generative AI variations are underneath. And see, if you look at, I'm good, Jessica, thank you. You can move on to the next one. I would look at this picture. It's very interesting. I mean, if you look at this picture, you will see that you have some really cute dogs there. And then you also have some breakfast bagels and whatnot. There is a fundamental difference. If any of you are really, really worried that AI is going to simply replace us, this is something that can tell you, you train AI for years and years on how to identify a dog or a cat. You can do all that, but then pretty basic human eye, even a toddler can look at the pictures on the right side and then say, that one is a bagel and this one is a dog. And AI is going to struggle with that because you need to continue to provide the data for it to make, so there's going to be a point in time it doesn't see the data the same way. We are able to look at it and say, this is not a dog, this is a bagel, or this is a blueberry muffin. AI is not able to do that. That's where the training becomes very important. And I also say, humans fill in the missing details. AI cannot fill in the missing details without a whole lot of training. But it's a fascinating picture. Hallucination, the much talked about topic. The reason it's happening, if you look at the heart of how they even created this large language model in the first place, right? They went and took every data point or every information that's available on the World Wide Web, and then they created a model out of it. When you go and take that kind of information from every place, there are going to be contradictions because you are taking information from one website, you are also taking information from another website. So there could be contradictory information there. And there are times where the context of the information might not be very clear to the AI. So sometimes when you ask questions to a really large language model, it can come up with answers that are incorrect. And this is something that we should really, really keep in mind. One of the ways to minimize the hallucination is to have a very focused model, very well-trained model, and all of that takes a lot of time. The easiest way to access AI is the public model. The public models are prone to hallucinations, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in the coming up slides. So the way we are addressing hallucinations in our place, because judiciary is an area where precision and accuracy are very important. Unlike private industry, where it's a fight for survival, a lot of them they've jumped into this pool with both feet, trying to do this very quickly. We have to be extremely responsible with our approach. So the approach we are taking is the RAG model, which basically means the source of the information is tied to just our information, not the World Wide Web, not all of the data that's out there in the universe. We are purely focusing on the data set that is judiciary provided, and we are making sure that the inputs that are given by our users are not going anywhere. We are controlling the data, we are keeping the data. That minimizes the amount of hallucinations you can get because you are tightly controlling the data that goes into that. It also prevents information leakage. So the AI wave that we are talking about, there are different approaches everyone is taking to this AI wave, right? So there are people who are super excited, jump right into the wave without doing a lot of preparation. And as a result of that, they got into trouble. Many organizations have made $1 million mistakes, $1 billion mistakes because they got into this wave too quickly without preparing themselves to serve the waves. And then there are other organizations that have decided this is not for us. We are going to completely sit out on this technology until it matures. And I don't think that's a great approach also. But then there are third kind of organizations. That's where I think New Jersey courts and judiciary, we belong, where we have taken our time to understand the technology. We have taken our time to educate the technology to all of our users. And then we started doing it in an incremental way. If we wanted, we could have moved a lot faster, but we took a very calibrated approach of, we are going to do it ethically, we are going to do it responsibly, and that's the approach we have taken with this AI wave, and so far we've been surfing well.
And a few months ago, you might remember that the judiciary actually conducted a survey of 75,000 attorneys in New Jersey to sort of understand where people were coming from in terms of their general knowledge of artificial intelligence, their views on it, if they were positive or negative, whether they were using it personally, professionally. And a lot of what Laks just shared was really reinforced by that. There was a large portion of the legal community that said, not only am I not using it, I don't want to learn about it, and I'm not going to use it, and please stop talking to me about it. We appreciate those responses. We read them all, and we're very grateful for your input. But in all seriousness, it's helpful to realize that there's a portion of the community out there who's resistant even to just getting a basic understanding as to how this is going to work, which I think is going to be a hindrance moving forward. You don't have to embrace it. You certainly don't have to be using it professionally today, but to understand the capacity as well as the risks is going to be critical for any attorney. Sorry, Laks, go ahead. Absolutely.
Those are great points. One of the most common question that we get is AI going to take away our jobs? My response, and I've said this so many times, but I'll repeat to this audience, AI is not going to take away your jobs. AI is going to take away your tasks, right? So it's going to take away some of the tasks that you no longer want to do. These are very repetitive tasks. If you use AI very smartly, you will be able to guide AI to do all of those tasks for you so that you can focus on more value-added activity. I've been looking at this technology so closely at such a detailed depth for last few years. I can guarantee you that it's not going to get to a point where human can be thrown out of the mix. We are needed. We are very much needed to make this a success. Again, I cannot promise how the technology is going to evolve 10 years from now, 15 years from now, but based on whatever I have seen so far, we still have a place here. Threats to AI success, there are three risks I always talk about: the reputational risk to the organization by adopting AI. There is an operational risk that's involved, and there is also the financial risk because this is an expensive technology. Anytime you adopt a new technology, the early adopters used to get incentivized by the vendors by giving them a great deal to start trying out the technology. I'm not seeing that with the AI, especially if you want to do it in the most responsible way, most secured way possible. It's not cheap, it's very expensive, so we have to be very careful about it. And then the hallucinations needs to be avoided. We talked about it. Security is very critical. People are trying to use AI to attack the organization. So we have to return the fire by being a lot more secure and anticipate such threats.
And one of the things that I think is amazing about AI is that before AI, only Laks would have been on this panel. There really wouldn't have been a place for me to be here because people who didn't have a strong technical background really didn't have a whole lot to say about certain kinds of things, both on a positive level and on a really scary level. So the next slide is going to show something, and I'll describe what it is after Akil plays the little audio clip for you, because I think it's really emblematic of the degree to which AI has taken something that used to be limited to a very small group of highly skilled people and made it available to everyone.
Hey, Harrison, it's Mom. I'm running late to pick you up. A friend of mine from work is coming to get you at school. I know you haven't met them, but you can go with them today. Don't forget your cello.
So a couple weeks ago, my son Harrison, who's 9, and I were walking around the park, and he made this using a tool that he found on the internet for free in about 5 minutes. Harrison does play the cello, and he plays it pretty well, surprisingly, for a 9-year-old. And what's amazing to me about this is that before, and I'll put this in sort of the most negative terms to begin with, the threat actors, the people who were looking to do bad things, you had to have a whole lot of understanding, a whole lot of expertise. You had to have particular equipment. You had to know what you were doing when you sat down at a computer in order to be able to create something that could possibly fool someone else into believing it. Now you can be a 9-year-old kid walking around the park with your mom and do this as something that you think is kind of funny, and it's kind of plausible. And all of a sudden, that risk has gone from being narrowly constrained into something that could be very, very broad. Now, at the same time, and what I think is really important is that there's a huge plus side to that, because people have the ability to use this in a natural language way, in a way that improves access. And we'll talk about that further in the presentation. But I do think that there's a moment to be had here on the negative aspects of these emerging technologies. And what the next slide shows is some of the,
Hey, Harrison,
risks
it's
here.
Mom.
Oh, it always likes to do that when I play it too, Akil. So thank you. I'm glad it happened to you as well. To an extent, I think we are looking back now at some of our lower tech options, like the safe word that your parents used to give you to make sure that you had a way to know whether the person who you were talking to really was someone who they sent to pick you up at school. Because sometimes those low tech options are the best response to these high tech risks. And Laks, what would you add to that?
Absolutely. So the biggest concern right now is the lack of ability to distinguish what is real and what is not, because it's easy for people to say, even if they are involved now, they can say that it's not me, it's AI. And on the other hand, we get evidence that's generated by AI. One of the areas that's the least regulated at this point is AI, even though there are policy decisions that are being made. People are using different tools to generate fake AI, deep fakes and whatnot. So if the vendors finally come to an agreement that they can put a watermark, a digital hidden signature inside, which if, let's say, we create a tool to identify when you feed a particular audio or video to the tool, and if that tool can read that signature and say this was actually generated by AI, that's going to be tremendously helpful to the judiciary and every player that's out there. We are not there yet, because I'll tell you why. There is a big black market for this. The big vendors are very hesitant to start putting the digital hidden signature in there, because they think that once they do that, people will go to other players who can help them create the deep fakes without that kind of a signature hidden inside. So it's going to create a playing field that's going to be uneven, but it's going to get there. Until we get there, human review, even if we get there, human review is going to be very critical. I keep talking about the human in the middle. That is going to be the most important thing in terms of making sure the bad actors are not taking advantage of us.
And of course, the same kinds of safeguards that we've been practicing for some time remain really important here, which is the next slide that Akil can share in terms of just some of the basics. Make sure that you continue to do the things that you know are the wise things to do. Here's Harrison. That's his sister, Samantha, as well.
Cybersecurity is very important. Never share your password or other personal information.
So in addition to the importance of not sharing personal information, it's the added risk today that when we share that, it's not necessarily just with the person who we know was asking for it, but that there could be times that we're interacting with an entity that we believe to be a real person who's not. And that's where some of those low-tech safeguards chime in. I'm going to turn now to something that's more focused kind of on the theme for this program, having that foundation laid by Laks in terms of the terms that we're going to be talking about, the concepts of artificial intelligence, both the potential and the perils of this new technological evolution. I'd like to speak in general about our perspective here at the judiciary on the access to justice benefits of artificial intelligence, as well as some of the drawbacks. So as those of you who are familiar with things like ChatGPT or who regularly talk with Alexa, or even people who've had suggestions made to you by Amazon or Netflix know, AI today, generative AI in particular, provides an amazing new frontier where we have universal access to very quick information in a plain language format where you don't require any kind of expertise to access it. You don't need to know a programming language. You don't even need to know how to use things like terms and connectors the way that you used to in Lexis or West. You just need to be able to ask a plain language question the way that you would ask anyone that question. AI also has the ability to create a legally compliant document. At least on its face, you're making something that's going to look like what it is you're trying to create, even if you're not a lawyer. You want to draw up a quick contract for something, AI can do that, and it can do it in a way that complies, at least generally speaking, with the laws of your jurisdiction. On top of that, one of the key barriers that we see to access to the courts and to access to justice are language issues. The ability, and Akil mentioned this in his opening remarks, the ability to provide quick translation of content that's historically been available and accessible only in English means that there are people who are going to be able to access key content about the courts and about the justice system in a way that they never were before. And all of that is amazing. One of the things that I'm going to do here just for a quick moment, and I promise that if it doesn't work, I won't keep trying because it's always a little bit risky to do a live demo, is I'm going to ask a quick question of ChatGPT using its voice mode. Hey, ChatGPT, I got a ticket driving in New Jersey and I need to go to municipal court. I don't have all the money. Can you tell me an option that I might have to pay that?
If you're heading to municipal court in New Jersey and can't pay the full amount of your ticket, you can request a payment plan. Most municipal courts allow you to pay fines in installments if you show financial need. When you appear in court, explain your situation.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that information. Can you actually,
documents like,
could you actually repeat that information in Spanish for my friend? Well, we'll give it credit for having done pretty well in the first half of the demo. As we all know, obviously, I tested that repeatedly in this room and it worked beautifully. But my point here is that I have the ability to ask a question, not to type in something into a particular program, not to search through a series of websites, but to ask a very plain language question that came up with a very accurate answer, in that situation at least, that you have the ability to ask for a payment plan if you appear in municipal court, which is huge. But the benefits of AI, as shown on this slide, to me also lead us to what the real risks and drawbacks are. And so on the next slide, I would give you what I think is kind of the concern here. On the one hand, we have universal access to quick information that we can get in a plain language, no expertise needed format. On the other hand, that information is going to be of questionable reliability. Sometimes when you ask ChatGPT a question like that, and in particular when you're asking it about something as important as your legal rights and responsibilities, what it gives you isn't going to be as accurate as what I just got. Similarly, you have the ability to create a legally compliant document, at least something that meets the basic rules and requirements of submitting something to the court. On the other hand, that document might not be internally entirely correct. And that leads us to the third bullet, which I think is the biggest A2J risk of artificial intelligence. And that's that the interpretation and translation or the creation of these legally compliant, facially sufficient documents may mask a misunderstanding on the part of the court user. And so on the one hand, we have a real wonderful bridging of the access to justice gap because people can get their foot in the door who maybe couldn't before. On the other hand, what it is that they might come to the court with and what they might submit might be something that they weren't able to understand, because while it was created through ChatGPT and looks perfect on its face, the actual meaning of the terms and provisions aren't something that that person understands. So I'm going to turn it back over to Laks to give us a little bit more information about how the judiciary is seeking to make this as ethical and appropriate as possible.
The biggest risk that we have, I mentioned that earlier, is to move into this technology very quickly without doing a lot of testing. So the approach we have taken to this technology is that we decided to build one tool and build credibility, incrementally release it to our super users, continue to get their feedback. And once we get their feedback, we continue to modify our system until it builds total credibility. Then we will move on to other use cases. The initial use case that we have picked up at this point, we are using the retrieval augmented generation. I talked about RAG as the possible method to eliminate hallucinations, where the data that we are pointing to is our data. The data it's learning from is our data. The input and output both are very well contextualized by our own system. We are trying to improve the prompting skills of our users by doing more and more training. Prompting is going to be a super skill in the years to come. That's the best way for you to get the best out of any AI system. So that's what this picture is about. It is about how we are doing it in a very self-contained environment without risking ourselves to external exposure of our sensitive data.
And this is so exciting to me when I think about the various organizations that are providing legal services for people, the ability to control and to allow people to interact with and query your data and only find things that are posted on the LSNJ website, only find things that the public defender has offered to be, available because they want people to be able to access that. This is an amazing degree of control that enables all of the good of AI while really reducing a lot of the risks.
Right. And it does come with a price, because doing something like that requires a great deal of in-house expertise. I mentioned this earlier. A lot of companies simply outsource their AI efforts, and we decided not to do it because precision and accuracy are the most important things for our organization. Here are the foundational differences, where if you go with the public AI model, you can get to it quickly. It's broadly accessible, but you're running into a lot of risks in terms of security. However, with the internal version that we are doing, we are using proprietary data. It's highly customizable. We keep taking feedback from our users and making it better and better. We feel a lot more comfortable with that approach. But that's the foundational difference between what we are building and what the vendors are offering.
And so, as was mentioned early in the program, the New Jersey courts are deeply committed to educating individuals throughout the legal community in terms of, what artificial intelligence is, the way that it affects legal practice, and how people can be ethically using this. One of the key things that we saw from our Supreme Court was done earlier this year. Our court issued preliminary guidelines on the use of artificial intelligence by New Jersey lawyers. This has been out since January of 2024. And it was the consequence of members of the Supreme Court Committee on Artificial Intelligence, which was established by Chief Justice Ravner and includes a number of people who are on today's panel, and thank you all, as a way to provide guidance for lots of different communities. So we have lawyers, we have self-represented litigants, we have people who are internal to the judiciary, all of whom require guidance in terms of the appropriate use of AI. And these preliminary guidelines involve no amendments to the rules of professional conduct, and instead provide applications as to how those rules apply in particular ways that may be affected by AI. There's additional information that we have posted publicly on the court's website, and I won't go into the details of that, but I would say the court back in July of 2024 offered an initial CLE program that gave some general information about the ethics of AI. We have another one coming up on December 19th that's going to focus on the intersection between cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, and all of these are intended to be responsive to the concerns of the legal community that were expressed when we did that survey of the 75,000 attorneys. The first concern being, I'm afraid that if I even touch AI, I'm going to be committing an ethical breach. And the second being, I'm afraid that if I don't really know how to use this, I'm going to create a security risk. So we're going to continue in that series to offer free programs to enable people to figure out the best ways, whatever their place is in the legal community, whatever area of practice they're in, to use this technology to help people, to help their clients, to help self-represented litigants without as many of the risks as are otherwise involved. And I am very excited to hear from the remainder of the panelists. So Akil, thank you again for the opportunity to be here. And we hope to answer further questions.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jessica and Laks. That was a terrific breakdown and explanation. Quickly, I wanted to shift to the Office of the Public Defender, and we talked about the positioning of the OPD in terms of being the largest provider of legal defense services in New Jersey criminal court, and the demographics that come with that, representations of low income and communities of color. And we see the same types of overrepresentation on the civil side as well. Just jumping into the conversation, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what your organization does in terms of the Public Defender in New Jersey, for those who may not know, and then talk a little bit about the need for the OPD to have access to the tools and how your office might be leveraging AI to benefit the community.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us as part of this discussion, and thanks to all of the my co-presenters. Many of you, we've been working together in a number of capacities on AI in the legal profession and legal community. So first of all, the Office of the Public Defender is, as Akil said, the largest provider of criminal defense services in indictable courts in New Jersey. We handle 72% of people charged with indictable offenses in the state. We also do a lot more than that. Our office handles child welfare cases. We represent both parents in child welfare abuse and neglect cases and children in those cases. We also represent people who are in danger of civil commitment or are civilly committed in mental health. And we have a couple of specialty practices that work on Megan's Law cases and alternative commitment cases. So we have 1,300 employees, 66 offices, almost 700 lawyers. So when we're looking at AI, we're looking not only about how it's going to impact those 1,300 people, we're looking at how it's going to impact the people we serve, and both of those things. So I kind of put the work we're doing around AI in those two buckets, right? The people that we're serving versus the employees of the office and how it can make us more efficient. In terms of our clients, I am one of those people who sees AI as an equalizer. I think that there are a number of ways, and we're just starting to scratch the surface, that we can use AI to communicate with clients. Listening to Jessica do the Spanish translation, like thinking about translation for clients, thinking about customer service applications for our clients, thinking about ways to handle and process with our clients large volumes of discovery. So all of that is an area that AI can impact the people we serve. We also are looking at what our employees are doing around AI. One of the things that we have done is partner with the governor's office on innovation and the Princeton University to create an AI brief bank that will help our lawyers prepare briefs. It won't replace the human elements. It won't replace citations. We're still going to have to do the hard work of citing cases and making sure that the facts of the cases are applying. But in terms of what I used to call Franken briefing, right, where you go through all your old briefs and you cut and paste and you kind of cobble a brief together, we are partnering with Princeton to create an application that our lawyers can use that will do the Franken briefing for them, with a closed universe of cases that have been vetted by our appellate section. So that's something that's really exciting. We're also exploring ways to go through large volumes of discovery. We're seeing increasingly more and more body cameras, which is wonderful, right? More body cameras, more recordings, more of everything. But with more comes a need to sift through it. So for our investigators, our attorneys, and our support staff, we're looking at ways that we can use AI to sift through large volumes of discovery and help condense that discovery, make it more digestible for our attorneys, and then use it as we're preparing for trial and motions in the courtroom. So, I mean, I could go on and I don't want to. I know there are plenty of other people we have to hear from, but I think it's limitless. And while we do have to concern ourselves with all the safeguards that Laks and Jessica talked about, I just see this as such an opportunity for public service organizations, government organizations, to really equalize for our clients and for the people that are working in our organizations and serving them. And I'm very excited about the work that all the folks on this screen are doing, and the work that we're doing at the office to make that make all of that possible.
That's terrific. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Before we move, just a question about the impacts you're seeing in the courtroom.
So I'll be honest, I'm not seeing a tremendous impact in the courtroom yet, with the exception of one area. And that is forensic cases. And I think a little bit later, we're going to talk more in depth about forensics if we have time. But, you know, one of the things that has happened in the last decade really is that forensic science has been increasingly reliant on software, right? Kind of gone are the days where it's just an individual analyst in a lab using their naked eye to do things. That naked eye tends to be augmented by a software program that's helping go through the forensic data. A huge concern that we have in our forensic unit, and we have as public defenders, is when we start to kind of layer AI over that, you're even further decreasing sort of the human element. So we are a little bit concerned, and fortunately we have a wonderful forensic unit that's keeping an eye on this, but we are concerned about this intersection between AI and the software that is undergirding forensic technology, and then how judges are going to grapple with all of that. I mean, to be honest with you, and we are a bit behind, I think, in our I don't want to say in our courts. I think it's in the bringing of cases and in the litigating of cases and bringing into the courts cases that have really had to have the courts grapple with this issue of software and how it connects to decisions being made by people in a lab and software coding and whatnot. So now we're adding AI further into the mix. I think there are going to be huge challenges for judges in our courts that are parsing through forensic cases that involve not just lab analysts, not just software and software coders and the people who are building that software and the reliability of that software, but also now AI and how that is impacting both the lab analysts and the software. Kind of throwing that into the mix is creating additional hurdles. And we're just starting to see that happening with things like probabilistic genotyping, which is a sophisticated DNA software, and some other areas where we're very, very concerned about how courts are going to start looking at those things.
Thank you for that response, and thank you for all the work that you do. I wanted to now shift yet again to the Division on Civil Rights. And I think it's an interesting part of the conversation because the way it cuts at the access to justice question is a little bit different. And I know this, we've been talking, Trish, for some time about some of the things that you all are working on and doing at the division. And the lens which we're using AI in terms of acting to increase or impact legal services in a more direct way, but in a way that's protective of people's rights and one that can be used to perhaps protect against use of algorithms, facial recognition technology, things of that nature, and then the things that you're doing to monitor or to place legal protections for segments of the community that are vulnerable or traditionally have been underserved. So I'm wondering, Trish, if you can start with talking a little bit about what DCR does, and then talk a little bit more further about the work around algorithmic discrimination and disparate impact and any other related initiatives you think you want to share with us today.
Thanks, Akil. And really, I so appreciate all the work that Legal Services of New Jersey does and that all of the panelists today are engaged in around increasing access to the courts and mitigating our barriers to access to justice. My name again is Trish Perlmutter. I serve as Associate Director for Policy Outreach and Community Relations within the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights. The division was founded in 1945 with the passage of the New Jersey Law Against Discrimination, which we sometimes call the LAD, which is the oldest and we believe most comprehensive state civil rights anti-discrimination law in the country. Our mission is to prevent, eliminate, and remedy discrimination and bias-based harassment. And that mission really drives all of us who work at the division in our work and our zeal to protect New Jerseyans' civil rights. The New Jersey Law Against Discrimination prohibits discrimination and bias-based harassment in employment, housing, and places open to the public. And we also enforce two other laws, the New Jersey Family Leave Act, which provides job-protected leave for taking care of a family member or baby bonding time, as well as the New Jersey Fair Chance and Housing Act, which protects the rights of returning citizens in seeking housing upon leaving jail or prison. An important priority for the division at this moment is really thinking about the risks as well as the potential benefits arising from emerging data-driven technologies. And so I'm going to be talking today about two pieces of this work, understanding that our work is still emerging. We hope to be making an announcement in the coming weeks about this body of work. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview today. One piece of our work is the Algorithmic Fairness Project, where we're really looking very closely at the potential harms from technology. And the policy elements around this are addressing the increased use of what we're calling automated decision-making tools. And I really appreciate the judiciary's framing today that provided a good overview of some of the terms in use and describing how the protections against algorithmic discrimination under our existing laws and the New Jersey Law Against Discrimination, as well as educating New Jerseyans about what these tools are about the potential risks, and for regulated entities, what their obligations are, and for those who may be impacted about their legal protections and how to bring a claim to bring a complaint. So to be clear, just backing up, we in the division have what we call our reactive tools and our proactive tools. And so we are statutorily obligated to investigate every complaint that is filed with the division. You can file on our NJ Bias complaint portal, as well as the director has affirmative enforcement power to look at systemic claims and patterns of discrimination. And then on the proactive side of the house, which is kind of where my work falls, we have our policy tools around legislation, guidance, regulations, public information, know your rights trainings. We have a community relations team, as well as an education and training unit. One thing we're excited about is we issued proposed disparate impact regulations in June. We're anticipating the comment period. The main comment period for that has closed. We did do a modification, and that comment on the modification is still open, but we are anticipating final adoption in 2025. And once that occurs, we think we'll have some of the most expansive disparate impact regs in the country. Under the New Jersey Law Against Discrimination, policies or practices that are neutral on their face may violate the law against discrimination if they have a disparate impact on members of a protected class. We see this work as really kind of our springboard to addressing algorithmic discrimination because of the way algorithms work. They're saving us lots of time by combing through data, looking at patterns in that data, finding correlations, and then using those correlations to essentially divide groups of people by those who will be either advantaged or disadvantaged. So in some cases, that those groupings could be disparate treatment discrimination. For instance, if someone developed a housing screening, tenant screening tool that explicitly tried to sort out people who had access to housing vouchers and refused them housing, that would be an example of disparate treatment discrimination using an algorithm. In many cases, that differential impact will be based on disparate impact, where there are patterns of correlations that are being used that have a differential impact on protected characteristics. So our regulations on their own terms, talk specifically about automated employment decision tools and provide a number of specific examples that kind of help to frame how these tools can potentially violate our law. In addition, we're working on initial guidance on algorithmic discrimination under the New Jersey law against discrimination. And that guidance will make clear that the LAD continues to apply no matter the mechanism of discrimination, whether it's individual decision-making or decision-making that's aided by an algorithmic system that makes recommendations. Our laws continue to apply and protect New Jerseyans. We're also making clear that those who deploy these tools are liable for their use, whether or not they develop the tools or even whether or not they understand them. There's an interesting study out of Rutgers doing a survey of employers who are using algorithmic hiring tools. And essentially, we find that study showed that 63% of employers use these tools for recruitment. And at the same time, 47% expressed concerns about fairness. So I think we're seeing out there some disconnect between the convenience of these tools without fully understanding what the implications are. I want to say that the division is also looking at this moment, and Jennifer highlighted some of the opportunities, because this is really an all of government enterprise in New Jersey, is thinking about the state and what are the opportunities for innovation in the state. The governor convened an AI task force. That task force has developed a set of recommendations, one of which was DCR's doing its initial guidance, and also included a survey of workers and this Princeton, New Jersey AI kind of hub and relationship. So there are lots of things going on at a statewide level. There's also innovation going on with various divisions within state government. And within DCR, we are tentatively coining this a civil rights innovation lab that we hope to be launching. And basically, we are trying to take kind of the opportunities that this moment presents around technology to expand our enforcement work, to improve our Know Your Rights trainings, and see how we can improve the experience of complainants and respondents with the division. For instance, we issued a request for information to develop a data scraper. The division is already engaged in enforcement work around a variety of contexts, but particularly looking at, say, housing advertisements. That work is very kind of labor intensive as on a individual basis. So kind of the concept is, from this request is, can we develop a data scraper so that we can be looking more systematically and efficiently at, advertisements that violate the Fair Chance in Housing Act, for instance, in terms of not permitting returning citizens from being considered for housing or other discriminatory forms of advertising. So that's a brief overview. I'd be happy to provide a little more information, but those are some of the kind of where we see the landscape right now within the division of making kind of really wanting to enforce our laws and make sure that there's a regulatory framework that encourages responsible use of these tools, at the same time kind of making a risk management framework within the division to see how we can expand the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Trish. Thank you for that and all the work that you and the folks at DCR are doing to protect the rights of the communities in New Jersey. Finally, wanted to shift the presentation a bit to speak with Abdul Rehman. Now, I know at Seton Hall University School of Law and clinical professor, you sit at an interesting cross-section of this question of legal practice and student engagement. And as you feel free to share your slides, if you want to talk about your work, you want to talk about community engagement, and particularly your thoughts on how we brush up against access to justice in your neck of the woods.
So in terms of technology issues, let's just move on from there at that point. My name is Abdul Rehman Khan. I teach at the Center for Social Justice at Seton Hall Law School. It's great to be here. Thank you so much, Akil, Legal Services of New Jersey, to my co-panelists, and to everyone who's tuned in today to think about how we can contextualize AI within our work. My focus at the New Jersey Legal Design Lab, an extension out of the Center for Social Justice at Seton Hall Law School, and in partnership with the Housing Justice Project in the state of New Jersey, is on contextualizing our work within community-informed movement work. And so for us, the focus is not so much on AI as a means to an end, but really thinking about the process. What is it that the needs are? How can we think critically about that approach? And how can we promote better outcomes for folks? And so we start always with thinking about, focusing, and working with folks who are deeply impacted by the issues that we are thinking about. So my background is in eviction defense work, housing instability, representing families, individuals who are being disruptively displaced from their homes. And what we see is that, from a lawyer's perspective, we will oftentimes try to introduce as many direct services as we possibly can. We'll try to appeal a novel doctrine. We'll try to draft an ordinance with unique tenant protections, let's say on habitability issues. Some folks in different states will employ video games to teach tenancy law. But what we end up always concluding is that our work should flow from community needs and goals and not predetermined solutions. So in short, AI might work in certain contexts and it might not work in other contexts. And so let me stop to share. Okay. All right. So what exactly is the New Jersey Legal Design Lab? The New Jersey Legal Design Lab is a social change laboratory where we attempt to combine law, design, and education to channel power into local movements for housing justice. So oftentimes we think about design as an aesthetic end, but we don't think about it as really what it's endeavoring to do, which is a creative approach to solving problems. In the context of evictions, for example, it's really easy to think about the design of evictions where we have hundreds of thousands of complaints filed in New Jersey every single year, where, as Nicole Summers showed while she was at Harvard Law School, where even with meritorious habitability claims, close to 80% of tenants represented by counsel still do not benefit from the implied warranty of habitability. And we see Andrew Scherer's work at New York Law School really delve into the historical context of how what we're experiencing is not a mistake. It was designed to keep folks at the margin. And so if we approach a lot of our work with the perspective that we need one more law, that we need one more direct services attorney, that we need one more great appeal, then we're missing the point. And to be clear, what we need to do is we need to concretize our direct services work, our appellate work, our policy work, and all of our technology into movement work. And so what we do at the lab is we attempt to co-collaborate with, co-create with folks who have been primarily impacted at this point in time by housing instability. So we use design methods to solve problems that involve the law. And there are a lot of folks who are working at this intersection, folks at Penn, at Justia Lab, Rodrigo Carmena, Jules Rochelle at New Law Lab, Nora Alhader at Stanford Law School, Quinton at Suffolk LIT, who does a lot of AI work in terms of building out apps that folks can use to file complaints directly in court. But the key always, even in that work, is to make sure that whatever it is that we're doing flows from community needs. And so at the top, we sort of immediately think about information design. How can we develop better ways, for example, to get key information out to communities? And I always think about the incredible tenant handbook that Legal Services of New Jersey has put out for folks and lawyers to use that comes up with explanations of the law. We also think about product design and service design. How can we develop products and services that really service community agency and organizing? We think about organization design. Are our organizations structurally developed in a way that flows from the needs of the communities that we are attempting to service? And then we think about system design and narrative function. Are the stories and systems that we operate within, the complex systems that we operate within, are they providing a higher value? And so in doing so, we think a lot about the work that Daniel Farbman has done in illustrating how abolitionist attorneys, in responding to the Fugitive Slave Act, thought about how direct services can work to advance the larger abolitionist goals. So there was a schism in the community. Should direct services attorneys, in responding to the Fugitive Slave Act, should they operate within the courtroom, or should they completely avoid any attempts at representation, recognizing how critically unjust those laws were? And what Farbman is able to illustrate is that direct services attorneys who went into the courthouse and represented folks, but purposely disrupted and delayed proceedings in an attempt to create space, capacity, and time for organizers outside of the courthouse to organize, strategize, conceptualize ideas moving forward, that was key. And so what we should be thinking about is how can we employ AI in direct services work and a really great ordinance and really great appellate strategy in a way that uplifts and creates space for folks. Also, to be clear, we do not need AI to solve our A to J issues. If we had the bandwidth in our society, that fortitude to think about evictions, to think about immigration, to think about criminal justice and DV and all of the areas that we're focused on, AI is a tool. It's not a solution in and of itself. And it can oftentimes serve as a distraction for our ability and attempt to think about the tools that we have existing today that allow us to promote human dignity, that allow folks to stay within their homes. And so we'll talk a little bit about the work that we do in our clinic, in the Legal Design Clinic and at the Legal Design Lab, and how we think broadly about the Housing Justice Project, which extends across all 3 law schools in New Jersey. So first, our core is to understand what is the problem that we are attempting to solve for. it's easy to think that the problem we're trying to solve for is more attorneys, or better protection, or better enforcement. But it's key that we define the problem. And when we thought about evictions and we invited tenants and organizers to our classroom, and we worked through the course of deeply understanding all of the advocacy that's been done, we invited experienced attorneys and policymakers and advocates. We spent months exploring the issue and then synthesizing all of our insights. And at this point, our clinic is a year long. So we spent a few months just on this step. What is it that we're actually focused on within the context of evictions? Then we move into ideation. And it's really easy to jump into ideation without that core discovery, a core aspect of how we're trained as lawyers. What flows from this? What are our solutions? Are we attempting to create a new app? Are we trying to come up with a really great argument that challenges the Marini rent deposit requirement on habitability places? Are we attempting to come up with a novel ordinance that gives jurisdictions agency to come in and create emergency repairs and then fine landlords at triple the rates? Are we attempting to create more opportunities for direct services attorneys to get in to courthouses? Are we trying to come out with better mediation before trial? And then we prototype and we work on all of this with community members flowing directly from direct services cases. So one example, we were representing before we got into this work, we were just doing direct services work, and we were working in a building in Montclair where we kept on seeing a subsidized building in Montclair, kept on seeing certain discrepancies that kept on popping out, financial discrepancies, a lack of proper accounting. And so our class, we went out to the building and we were thinking we were going to meet with just a few folks. We ended up meeting with many different folks from the building. We realized that we were observing larger trends. And so in addition to providing direct services and making sure that folks were able to remain in their housing, we thought broadly about what tools we can support in the tenants' efforts to find housing justice. And one of the key aspects was folks trying to create a tenant association so that they can collectively bargain with the landlord so that they're better aware of what issues exist within the building, and so that there are better ways to support internal organizing in that building. And so students in the classroom worked with tenants in the building to develop a series of prototypes that that flowed from hundreds of ideas, and 2 of those prototypes are still being developed. One of them, being an issue tracker, where folks in the building can update each other using a design that was created and iterated upon many different times, where people can say, hey, my neighbor has the same mouse issue that I have, or my neighbor is experiencing the same type of financial irregularity that I am. And we learned that people cared more about what their neighbors were experiencing than sometimes what they were experiencing on their own. And that was a key insight for us, because it allowed us to think about not individualizing the problem, but being able to understand how folks more broadly were affected. And so I know that we are short on time, and so I'll skip through, but we also, reference Ruha Benjamin's work at Princeton, the idea that, we engage in a faith-based futurism, eugenics calculus, this idea that, when eugenics was a dominating technological force in this country not too long ago, the idea of prioritizing hypothetical benefits over the current costs to folks. And there are a number of organizations that push back on that metric, that do not say, we won't engage in AI, but how do we engage in it in a way that prioritizes a current calculus? Allied Media Projects, Athena, Data for Black Lives, Our Data Bodies, No Tech for Apartheid, Algorithmic Justice League. So these are some organizations that are actively engaged in concretizing AI. Just a few closing remarks. Again, the lab, the New Jersey Legal Design Lab, we are attempting to serve as a conduit between institutions to break down silos that exist between us, which is why events like this are so important. We think about how the process matters more than the tool, and we think critically about what problem it is that we're actually solving for. So a lot of words, a little bit of time. I'm really happy to connect with anyone who wants to speak afterwards, and thank you again for the
Thank you, Abdul Rehman. This is tremendous. It's it's great to see some of the pieces coming together when we're talking about collectively what we do for justice and for ultimately for the community. And now it's got to be client-centered. Our president, Dawn Miller, has stressed this at the outset. Client-centered or people-centered. So I will turn it over to Jessica to address any questions that she feels need to be addressed.
Akil, thank you so much. I'll make this very brief because I think that there are a couple issues that have been raised. I've been watching some of the questions that come in, and I just wanted to demo something for a moment. For those of you who haven't spent time using the public AI tools, my takeaway from this would be that one of the best ways to improve access to justice in terms of the use of artificial intelligence is really what Laks touched on at the beginning, and it's going to be education on prompt engineering. How can you use the tools effectively to do what it is you're trying to do? So one of the earlier questions that was posed had to do with someone having asked a question of an AI tool as to whether their landlord was required to provide a refrigerator for them. And AI gave them the wrong answer and the person was very upset. Totally understandable. I would be upset too. So I went to ChatGPT and I'm using the 4.0 model. I pay for this privately because I find it worthwhile for myself. And I asked that question. In New Jersey, does a landlord have to provide a refrigerator? Please provide the legal basis for your answer. So not only did ChatGPT give me a response to that, it gave me a place here where I can see where it got that information, and it gave me, again, the sources that followed that. So I followed up with a couple of other questions. And this goes to some of the issues that have been raised since then. And I'm not touching on the legal merits as to questions of habitability or things like that, but rather the way that you can use this particular AI tool. And I'm also not endorsing ChatGPT on behalf of the courts. I'm just giving it as an illustration. In New Jersey, does a landlord have to provide a working toilet in a residence? Please provide the legal authority. So here you get an overview of the implied warranty of habitability, which is lovely. It has citations to cases. It has citations to the state housing code, habitability standards. All of that's helpful, but we know that AI is something that is prone to hallucinations, to providing information, particularly in response to legal queries, that is not reliable. So I never rely on anything that AI, particularly something like ChatGPT, is going to offer me without checking it in terms of how I ask the questions again. So because I try to be polite, I thank it again. I want to make sure that those cases are real. Can you give me a link to Marini versus Ireland through Justia or Case Text? And I pick those because those are publicly available legal citation sources, not something that's going to have a firewall like Lexis or West, not something where you're going to have to pay. And so this gives me here those questions with actual citations to Marini versus Ireland in those kinds of publicly available sources. Another question, and I'll stop after this example, an attorney asked in terms of how they could use AI better to help them with legal letter writing. So I built on this example and I asked to write a half-page letter from an attorney at a 6th grade reading level, which really goes again to being client-centered and meeting people where they are. If I know that the person to whom I'm trying to communicate this information needs to have this information provided at a certain level, that's the way that I'm going to ask to structure it, even if that might be contrary to how I would typically on my own write, and it might have maybe a lot less legalese in there. Explaining to a tenant whether a landlord has to provide a refrigerator. So here's a short narrative letter. I'm not going to read the duration of that. What I am going to do is to show that after I had this generated in English, I then went back and asked the follow-up question just to illustrate again the capacity to provide a quick translation of something. Perfect, thank you. Now please provide that letter in Portuguese with a sentence at the bottom saying that the translation was with technology and may be imperfect. And that's the last illustration that I'll share. But I do think that as we look ahead to the next year of AI education and outreach and training, it's going to have to focus on how we can teach people, and not just people who have the benefit of taking expensive courses and getting certifications, but everyone, how they can use this technology with those kinds of internal checks to be as effective as possible.
Thank you, Jessica. I actually was going to ask you about that. You know, one of the questions that I had in my mind was this creation of a two-tiered system of justice, where folks who don't have access to the more expensive models that are more restricted in a language model sense than other free tools you might find on the internet that will search the entire internet and can provide hallucinations and all. How do we prevent that from happening? I think you touched on it a little bit in your response to that question in terms of education. And I open this up to all of our panelists. Any thoughts around the concerns about that, or ways to mitigate that, or any thoughts on it?
I'll just add one thing and then turn it over to the rest of the panel, which is somebody suggested the LSNJ Eviction Prevention Handbook. And I think that taking something like that and teaching people how to query a reliable legal source, especially through a free site like yours, would be a phenomenal next step.
Akil, I did want to address the sort of two-tier system that you talked about, kind of from two perspectives, and also attempt to answer one of the questions that has come up in the chat from, I think, from attorneys in the audience, like thinking about how to grapple with this in courtrooms. I think to me, it comes down to integrity, application, and access. And what I mean by that is that any software that we are going to be introducing in courtrooms, so anything that we're going to be introducing in courtrooms, it comes from a place of integrity. In 2021, the IEEE, which I always forget that it's the International Association of Electrical and Engineers, came up with this idea of carceral technologies, right? Those technologies that are going to be used in courtrooms to convict people, to evict people, to award custody of children, to do things that are on a scale of import, right? Like I can come up with the software application that creates Wordle and put it on the market, right? And if it's imperfect, nobody is going to die. The same standard should not be used for software that's keeping our planes flying, keeping our heart monitors working, and for technologies that are going to be introduced in court. So I think while it's great that we're talking about, you know, algorithmic data and how it can be helpful, or how all of these systems can be helpful, we also have to think about how they're being applied and against whom. And as we're going into courts, like I said earlier, being really vigilant about all of those things, about the application, about the creation, about the standards, about the software code, about the implicit bias. When I think about things like facial recognition, I think about the fact that those systems are biased against people of color, both by who is developing the code and who the systems are trained on. So we have to think about all of those things, and all of that's wrapped up in access to justice, as well as just still the age-old problem of the ability for people to get the tools. And that's where the access comes in, right? People have to have cell phones, people have to have computers in order to access this technology. So at a very, very basic level, we start there. So I think like those three things, the integrity of the data that's coming into our courts, who it's being applied against, and how, or where we're applying it, and then at the threshold, just the access for people coming in, that everyone is able in one way or another to use these technologies.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in if I could. I think that's really a helpful framework, because a lot of what we've been talking today is about how these tools can be helpful for a lot of low-income, unrepresented folks who have to navigate the court system, who already face so many barriers that can discourage people from being a participant or asserting their rights or needs. I think what like the division, a lot of our concern is how that same group of people are impacted by these decision-making tools that are being used on them. And they're being used on all of us, frankly, but the high stakes may be greater for historically excluded community members. So I think there are elevated concerns around risk management framework, how design, training, and deployment risk gets baked in, and how these tools are being used currently. So, I mean, I think there can both be promise and peril at the same time, and that we need to be vigilant about both of those things and protecting individual rights.
One thing we need to be extremely mindful is the technology vendors, they have every incentive to overstate their capabilities. I've been seeing this time and again because they're investing a lot of money into building the tools and they're looking for people to buy them. They are overstating the capabilities. So we need to be extremely careful in terms of vetting the products, making sure the people with the subject matter expertise are the ones vetting the product before we get them into the organization, not just the technologists, right? I'm saying this as a technologist person. This technology is very different from every other technology that came before this. We have to be extremely mindful. I'll also say this, the competency gap is being narrowed by this technology. People who have put in a lot of years, they tend to know the most about the topic. Now this technology is helping people with fewer years of experience to fill that competency gap by leveraging the technology. So there is a benefit to that. But you just have to reach out and get the right information. Otherwise, there is a lot of harm that can cause.
Those are all great responses. Jennifer, you said something that resonated with me. You started talking about bias. You said many things that resonated with me, but that in particular, I wanted to also offer that as an opportunity for any of our panelists to address bias, how we deal with it, what can be done, if anything. And then also to have final words. I want to be respectful of the time of our panelists and those who are attendees. So I'll allow you to have a few moments to reflect on any final thoughts, or if you do want to touch on the bias issue, whichever you would like to do.
I mean, I'm happy to.
Yeah, go on.
I was just to touch on bias. I think just simply, and this is the subject for, I guess, a whole other CLE is bias in technology. But I think we sometimes have this idea that technology can't be biased because it's a machine and it's code. But the bias comes in, just like in forensics, right? We think, oh, DNA is the gold standards, bias can't affect it. And there's all these studies about how implicit bias affects outcomes in forensic science, all sorts of technology. So nothing is bias proof, unfortunately. And we all have to be cognizant and conscious of the fact that the bias creeps in by the people who are creating the technologies, by the way the technology is used, against whom it is used, all of that. And that is all something that, as we are representing people, we need to think about as we're rolling out technology and building technology and making sure that the integrity of the technology, at least from my perspective, is something that should be even introduced into a courtroom in front of a judge or a jury. And it's also something that we all need to remind ourselves of as a threshold matter when we're looking at any technology that we're deploying or we're using against people in courtrooms. So, unfortunately, bias creeps in everywhere. And the first step, as we know from many of these programs, the first step in that is acknowledging that it exists and figuring out how to mitigate it and exploring that through experts and all of that when we're looking at these cases.
I was going to say the same thing. The technology has the potential to amplify the bias if you're not careful, but the bias is already in the system. It's already in the data. We just have to be very careful in terms of what kind of data we should take and train the models, actually. That's the key thing.
Again, I think we're looking at this as, a need to regulate and a need for enforcement work. I certainly think that there's a lot of interesting work going on around bias mitigation, and that sometimes these models can be changed to reduce or eliminate the discriminatory impact. And sometimes the solution may be to go back to not using the tool and to have, humans making a decision and human oversight. I think that the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, has printed some good information around managing bias and risk in AI. And there are a lot of people working on this. And in some cases, they're finding that our data sets are already incredibly biased, right? So in some ways, there are opportunities here to reduce bias. People are looking at ways to more accurately assess credit risk for people who have low credit scores, or people who are not are cannot be assessed for credit. There's a lot of interesting work out here, and I think it's an interesting time to be working in this space.
For sure. I see that we're running a little bit over time, so unfortunately, we're gonna begin to close out the session. I want to thank all of our panelists for offering their time and their expertise. Thank everybody for logging onto the webinar today. I hope you found it informative and interesting. I certainly did. There's going to be more Justice Series events in 2025. That'll be announced soon in the coming year. And again, thank you everybody for joining, and take care.